Hello and welcome to Undercommon Taste. This is a podcast where we create and discuss homebrew content for tabletop RPGs.
I could be brown, I could be blue, I could be violet sky, I could be hurtful, I could be purple, I could be anything you like.
I'm Ian Woodworth, I'm joined by my co-host James Daly, and today we are following up on a promise that I made about 25 episodes ago. I happened to catch the end of our Foothills episode the other night whenever I was checking on my daughter, because she likes to listen to our podcast through her speaker sometimes. And I caught where I said that she had requested episode about dragons.
So she gets to listen to her very own dummy master going to bed?
her very own Dum Dum Master, yes.
Yeah, Dum Dum Master, yes.
And I had said in that episode that we weren't going to do it yet, but it was on the docket for us to get to. And then I promptly forgot about it. Yeah. Until I heard that episode. And so this is me starting to fulfill that promise that we are going to do dragon episodes.
Yeah, we had actually discussed previous, and I was actually looking forward to it because this week was Mardi Gras, and I was really looking forward to doing some Mardi Gras episodes and planning, but daughter promises are far more important, so...
And we're still going to get to that. I mean...
the season will have shifted a touch, but...
Well, I mean, if we do it for next week, then we will have just missed St. Patrick's Day, which is another big...
Yeah, which is great because I am definitely ready to shake off some seasonal depression, so...
Yeah, it's been rough.
It has been a long gray.
We were talking before we started recording the episode proper about how it's been hard for us to find spoons the last few days.
Yeah.
So this is part one of our talk about dragons.
Dagrons!
Dagrons! So today we are going to be focusing primarily on chromatic dragons. We'll do one episode on the chromatic, one episode on the metallic, one episode on the gem dragons, and then depending on how many we end up talking about, one or two episodes about the other dragons.
I mean, really,
because there are so many different other dragons that have been included in Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, that other category is kind of huge.
I mean, because you have the different planar dragons, you have the not quite chromatic dragons, the dragons that have colors but are not included in the big color groups. So you mean second edition had yellow dragons and brown dragons and purple dragons and steel dragons and mercury dragons.
Okay, I didn't know about a mercury dragon. That sounds amazing. But I'm buckled up and I'm all in on the Dragon Lich because that's just...
Yeah, and then we're going to have stuff like the Draco Lich and the Shadow Dragon and the Deep Dragon and the Aberration one that's in Fizban's, the one that got infected by the Elderbrain. Is it an Elderbrain dragon? I think it might just be called an Elderbrain dragon.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay.
So yeah, it is a dragon that was parasitized by an Elderbrain.
Oh.
So yeah, those are things that we're going to get to, and it might take us a couple of episodes to go through all of those, and we're going to break it up. We're not going to have 6 dragon episodes in a row. As much as I would love to do that, we are going to break these up.
I was going to say, I'm good for writing 6 dragon episodes.
So let's go ahead and get started into this. I'm wanting to start off each of these episodes, at least these first few, talking a little bit of just generic dragon lore from the D&D perspective. Granted, the specifics of this are D&D lore, but you can cherry pick and use any or all or none of this in whatever game system that you're using, because the best tool, it's not plagiarism, it's recycling.
Yes. And even in most tabletop games, because, I mean, it's Dungeons and Dragons. If you're talking dragons on a tabletop game, it's probably going to be a D&D, and that is where probably 85 to 90% of the lore has been generated. So even if you're transplanting or you find another system that has dragons in it, they are probably leaning fairly heavily on established D&D lore. And so that's one of the things we'll talk about is, hey, you don't have to do it exactly this way, but you can throw this into your game or your system in a couple small tweaks, and they'll still be perfectly feasible.
Yeah. So one thing that I have noticed whenever I go in and I'm reading the lore behind a lot of the dragon stuff from edition to edition, particularly the cosmology aspect of it, the dragging gods and whatnot, the more I realize that it's like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Douglas Adams, whenever he wrote Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and they did it multiple times. There's the BBC radio drama, there's the BBC TV show, there's the movie, there's the book, and all four of those products have the same characters but different plots. The stories are different.
Yeah, a little bit, yes.
And it's intentional. And Douglas Adams said this is intentional because of the improbability drive. Because every time you use the improbability drive, everything in the universe shifts a little bit.
I love that as a way to escape any kind of continuity errors. Oh, I love it. It is the best, laziest answer for why things are different. Oh, we want to do this. Just a probability drive will be fine. I love it.
And so I have accepted the fact that dragon cosmology across the editions is like the Hitchhiker's Guide.
Very fair, yes.
It changes for each edition because the perception of the cosmos and reality shifts per edition, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Every edition's cosmology is correct for that edition.
And if you want to borrow it, then I have to correct it too, because who's going to tell you no?
Right. And so when you get to 5th edition, there are really only 2 dragon gods that you can really talk about. You have Bahamut, who is the good god of metallic dragons, and you have Tiamat, who is the evil goddess of chromatic dragons.
Yes.
Both of these characters are based on actual mythological figures or creatures from Mesopotamian mythology. Bahamut, often conflated with Behemoth, was this massive fish/whale creature that basically formed the underpinning of the world.
He was the base turtle. When you have
the
flat Earth concept of turtles all the way down, he was kind of that foundational turtle.
So he was the whale upon which stood a cow, upon which stood an angel, which held up the world.
Yeah.
And in some stories, there is actually also a serpent further down underneath Bahamut. And this is all from my 5 minutes on Wikipedia, so this may be completely wrong. I will admit that. It's hard to find good sources on Mesopotamian mythology on short notice.
Yeah, you want to look up more of the art history of things, but yeah.
And then Tiamat was the personification of creation. Tiamat was the mother of the Sumerian gods, I believe, or the Babylonian gods, one or the other.
I forget which.
But she was the personification of the primordial sea. So she was the salt water. She mingled with the god who was the personification of fresh water. And when they mingled, from them came all of the gods.
Now, if I recall correctly, I think Tiamat's going to kind of relate close to Typhus in Greek mythology. And again, Typhus was the father and progenitor of monsters, but it was this descendant of actual pure chaos.
Right. That ended up happening later.
Okay.
Because apparently they made so many gods that they caused such a ruckus that Daddy just couldn't handle it anymore. And there was a war between the gods in which Daddy got murdered.
Uh-huh.
And so Mommy picked a different god to make a new batch of gods with. And at some point during all of this, as sort of a giant middle finger to the god children that killed God Daddy, Tiamat spawned monstrous gods. And so ultimately, the storm god Marduk ended up slaying and dismembering her and using her various body parts to construct portions of the cosmos.
Which is great because this is not the only time this happens in Babylonian mythology. You go back and you look at the Epic of Gilgamesh, and their version of the flood story is the same thing. So now you've got the new gods, and the gods are sitting there, and the people down on Earth are just too damn loud, and the gods can't get good sleep. And so they're just going to snuff a lot of them out. That's it. You guys are too damn noisy.
I have never related to a pantheon more.
It's like, you guys are too damn loud. We're going to snuff you all out. Screw it. Hush. I love it. Yeah. So
Uh,
again, flooding things because you're too damn loud. Not uncommon in Babylonian mythology.
yeah. And the fun part about this is that Marduk was actually an aspect of Bahamut in second edition.
Okay.
It was Bahamut's aspect in a second pantheon that he happened to be in.
Okay.
And throughout the events of second edition with the Time of Troubles and the Spell Plague and all of that, a whole bunch of stuff that I need to actually read up on in order to give a more concise summation of what happened. But things happened, a bunch of gods died, and a bunch of pantheons got consolidated because, well, they sold TSR to WotC and they needed a more condensed pantheon of gods.
That'll happen. Now, I will jump in here too on 5th edition, a slight derivation. So up until Fizbin's, Tiamat and Bahamut were the two deities. And with Fizbin, that came out. And then after that, the War of the Dragon Queen, that does bring up both Fizbin, who is, I can never say his actual proper name, Paladin, Palladian. And
he's the Platinum Paladin is one of his names, yes.
Yeah, and they are both draconic deities, and they actually have their own constellations in the stars, and that's how, like, the learned people, the wizards, and the people of Dragonlance know something's up is when they look up and constellations start missing. That means those gods have taken some sort of mortal form and have come down to Earth to do some business. So generally, like, you look up and stars are missing, you know shit's about to go down.
So in 3rd edition, because 3rd edition, the default setting was Greyhawk and not the Forgotten Realms like it is in 5th edition. In 3rd edition, both Bahamut and Tiamat were gods in the Draconic pantheon under the goddess Io, not to be confused with the overgod in the Faerunian pantheon, Ao.
Right.
Because, of course.
Yes. Well, I mean, we can't be clear about anything. I'm wondering if Io, and I don't know my relation too much, but you have the Jovian moon Io. I wonder if there's any relation there.
Oh, I'm sure. Because they borrowed the names of real world gods for fantasy gods all the time in all of the different settings.
Yes.
And so the fun thing is that Tiamat also managed to slip into the Faerunian pantheon, and Bahamut was kind of there too, because of the stuff that happened in the Time of Troubles, where they both died but didn't, and weirdness.
Yeah,
happened.
it gets a little hand wavy.
Yeah.
It was the 90s.
But as an aside, one of the things that I find really funny about that particular pantheon under Io is that the chaotic evil dragon god of fire and destruction is named Garrix. GarYX.
Of course it is.
And I'm 97% certain that is a Gary Gygax self-insert because he consistently and constantly named things in Greyhawk after actual people.
Yeah, it was the first Stan Lee cameo before Stan Lee did cameos.
I don't know when this particular god was created, and I don't know timeline-wise when Stan Lee's first cameo would have been.
Oh, Stan Lee's first cameo would have been... Well, I'm thinking the first Spider-Man movie, which was really the first big Marvel film, was out in 2002.
But did he have cameos in the comic books?
Oh, I don't know if he... I don't think he did. I'm going to have to look this up now. I don't think he did.
That's why I ask that, because if he had self-insert cameos in the comic books, there's a possibility that a Stan Lee cameo would predate this particular self-insert.
Hold on, I've got to figure this out now. Hold on. Oh, yeah, he's got What If in 77, Daredevil number 79 in 64. Okay, good job, Stan Lee. I know what, he's just one of the crazy old men I have to tip my hat to whenever he pops up. Well done.
Okay. So in 5th edition, Bahamut and Tiamat, technically speaking, aren't actually gods, ? They are primordial beings.
Okay.
According to the dragon lore of the first world that is presented very briefly in the beginning of Fizbin's Treasury of Dragons, Bahamut and Tiamat worked together in concert to create the first world.
Okay.
And
I'm getting a lot of Greek myth feeling here.
Oh yeah, of course there is.
Yeah.
And then the two of them working together created the ruby dragon Sardior, which, looking things up, Sardior made his first appearance in Dragon magazine issue number 37 in 1980.
Well done.
And the fact that he is only just barely mentioned in Fizbins and not actually gone into in any real detail is very painful for me.
Well, I think it's because the aftermath of Sardior.
It does make sense to an extent. But basically, after Bahamut and Tiamat work together to make Sardior, Bahamut works with Sardior to make the metallic dragons, Tiamat works with Sardior to make the chromatic dragons. So we have the first world, which is literally these dragons are claiming in their creation myth that dragons created the material plane.
Yeah.
And then the gods show up. The gods just waltz into the material plane like they own the place, and they bring all of their annoying little petitioners and adherents with them.
They get noisy, and we have to drown everybody all over again.
Exactly. Exactly. The problem with that is that Bahamut gets subjugated and Tiamat gets imprisoned, and Sardior either goes into hiding or shatters with the world, because that's the concept behind why there are multiple planets in the material plane, is that the first world was sundered and split across the cosmos, and each fragment made its own world.
Understandably.
And the creation myth also goes in and says that the shards of Sardior are what became the gem dragons.
I can see that.
There's also still my personal headcanon that I came up with whenever we were going on our planar survey and we were talking about the Nine Hells, because that was just as Fizbins was coming out. And I listened to an interview, I think with Chris Perkins on Dragon Talk, talking about Sardior and, you know, the creation myth and all of that. And the way that he was talking about it led me to generate the headcanon that the ruby rod that Asmodeus uses to assert control over the Nine Hells is a fragment of Sardior.
And that would make absolute perfect sense.
Yeah, it is a sizable fragment of Sardior, and that's how he is able to get his power from it. So as everything continues on, Bahamut ends up making nice with the gods, and they eventually let him join their club. And Tiamat, being imprisoned in the first layer of the Nine Hells, is understandably bitter about all of that.
It would make sense.
And reading the poem suggests that Bahamut still cares for Tiamat. Bahamut still wants to see Tiamat free. And I think the only thing keeping him from releasing her is that he knows that she is going to go on a rampage and try and destroy the cosmos and try and kill all the gods in retribution for imprisoning her on the first layer of hell. Understandable. I'm not saying she'd be wrong to do it.
I would want to run this as like either an evil cleric campaign or even like, I don't know how I want to phrase this, but like an atheist campaign. Like your characters want to boot the gods. Like, you know what? We're sitting there, we've got all these things, these gods are meddling in all this stuff, they're just making stuff terrible for the various people down here. What if we just got rid of the gods? I know we can do it. Let's get Tiamat, she'll chase them all off, and then she'll give us a tip of the hat because we let her go, and maybe she'll let us be in the meantime, and you could build an amazing story off that foundation.
So here's the thing. You know the whole Rise of Tiamat 2-pack modules.
Yes, vaguely, yeah.
That Wizards put out like early on. Horde of the Dragon Queen and Rise of Tiamat.
I've played the first half of Horde.
So what you do is you make that the goal of the Cult of the Dragon.
Oh, yes. I like
Everything is already there. You're just giving them an actual, like, interesting reason to do it.
I like it.
But yeah, so the stanza that I'm inferring all of that information from in this poem is: breathe dragons, sing of Bahamut, maker of peace with the outsider deities, welcomed to Mountain Celestial, worshipped by some as the Platinum Paladin. Sing of his journeys of seeking, striving to understand the gods and their children, longing for Tiamat's freedom, grieving her loss from the face of creation. I mean, it sounds pretty...
Yeah, it's fairly clear.
Pretty clear cut to me. But anyway, that's where the dragons stand from a religious standpoint at 5th edition is that there are two gods. There's Bahamut and Tiamat. One of them's good, one of them's bad, and that's basically it. Like I said, there is a whole pantheon. If you want to get into all of that, find yourself a copy of the 3rd edition Draconomicon. That book is going to be mentioned a lot in these episodes.
Yeah.
Because they have a whole section at the front talking about anatomy and physiology and psychology and going into great scientific details, like how dragon eyes work.
Yeah, that is something. I understand they were not wanting to write an entire tome, but Fizbin did cut out on a lot of, I don't want to call it flavor text, but it's stuff I would geek out as a science kid and a science nerd. I would have geeked out on the dragons. And they did streamline Fizbin's quite a bit. There's a ton of information in there still.
Oh yeah, there's tons of useful information in there.
Yes.
Like if you want information on how to build a dragon as an NPC or build a dragon as a BBEG and how to build a layer around them and how to build motivations and all of that stuff and how to play them, this book is gold for all of that. Wanting to know anything about dragons in general, no.
Fair. Very fair.
So, as I mentioned earlier, there are 5 primary colors of chromatic dragons that we're going to be talking about tonight. There's the black, blue, green, red, and white. And as I mentioned, other colors do exist. There's brown, yellow, and purple. Those are the 3 that I can remember off the top of my head. They do exist. They are in books. They have not come to 5th edition. They're probably never going to come to 5th edition. And they're going to have to wait for another episode.
Yeah.
There are also some conventions that I think we should talk about very briefly that I think should and often are ignored. The first one, and this is the one that I think is often ignored, is that per the rules, chromatic dragons can't shapeshift. They can't take on an aspect. They can't take on a humanoid form.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of that.
Per the rules, only metallic dragons can do that. I think that is bullshit. I think that chromatic dragons should be able to do that too. I live in a world where chromatic dragons can take on humanoid forms.
Yeah, again, as we mentioned earlier, you're going to find dragons in a lot of different properties and game systems, and a lot of them are going to lean heavily on D&D. Now this, for us both, Ian and I are both a fan of Blizzard's games, and all of the dragons get that aspect where they can, I don't want to say a polymorph, but they can shift and take on a mortal aspect, as it were. And so if you're doing something like, Old Gods of Appalachia, a dragon in Appalachia would be amazing, and I could think of several that would fit perfectly. Monster of the Week, popping up against a dragon and having this dragon, teasing and taunting the party in an aspect before it hits its draconic form would be a great build-up of anxiety and tension. Kids on bikes, I could still see a dragon, and depending on how you want this dragon to present, it could just be them in their mortal aspect form that they're fighting. And at the end of it, whether they defeat or are defeated by the dragon, as the dragon leaves, they realize what they were actually tangling with. Again, would be a huge shock for the party.
Right. And I think in Kids on Bikes, the better thing to do would be they are helping the dragon, not realizing they're a dragon. And the dragon is just humoring them and letting them help.
Yeah.
Because the dragon can absolutely do this all by himself.
Yeah. But like I said, I could see them sitting there trying to spoil the plans of a government agent or a business mogul or something and they're doing all of this stuff. And then they have their big, whatever the end scenario is going to be, whether they win or lose, that thing goes off and shrugs off and is completely just it's not worth my time. And then turns into a dragon and flies off in front of the party. And be like, the whole time? Yeah, the whole time. He totally could have spanked you. He was toying with you the entire time. Or they were toying with you the entire time.
Yeah, they were just bored and entertaining themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
that is such a dragon thing to do.
It would be.
And then real quick, the other convention that I am throwing out the window is that per the rules, chromatic dragons are all evil. This goes into, for me, the same sort of thought process of all orcs are evil, all goblins are evil, all Yuan-Ti are evil. It is a gross generalization, and I think that it stymies creativity if you decide that because it's a chromatic dragon, it has to be evil. I think that you can come in with much more interesting scenarios whenever you're allowed to make your chromatic dragons not evil.
I can see that. Again, that's that whole like built-in rule. I mean, they're a monstrous race, so but they are hyper intelligent, and they do have morality built in. So they're not quite like devils and demons or angels.
Right, because they're native to the material plane, and the
Plane.
material plane does not have an alignment.
Yeah, no, yeah, exactly. The material plane is mutable.
Yeah. To go off of their assertion, they created the material plane. So
Yes.
they should not have a designated alignment if they are purely of the material plane.
That is an extremely strong point, and I like that. I was going to reference the old Order of the Stick, where it's like, yeah, we fought a dragon and we killed it. It's like, you killed it without even talking to it? Yeah, it was evil. How do you know it was evil? You didn't even try to talk to it. Its scales weren't all shiny? Oh, okay.
And then we find out, then Vesuvius drops the sheet that was hanging on the wall and sees the whole family tree and realizes that he just genocided an entire family.
Yeah.
Most of which were humanoid.
Yes.
Yeah.
But anyway, I need to go back and reread Order of the Stick. I think I'm due.
Yeah. Yeah, that is something that needs to happen that hasn't happened in a while. Okay, now that we're half an hour into talking, let's go ahead and dive into the dragons themselves. We're going to go in alphabetical order, so we're starting with black dragons. Black dragons are the dragons that prefer to live in swamps, and they have an acidic breath weapon.
Yes. So we do get a little bit on their personality with Fizbins. It is far more in depth with the Draconomicon. But your black dragons tend to be more solitary. They're not super social, so they are going to be aloof. They are going to be antisocial. So if you see them in a humanoid form or even in their draconic form, they're not terribly social. They like their space, they like their time, they like their stuff, and they're territorial, so how dare you step in their bubble?
They're Shrek. Get out of my swamp.
Exactly, yes.
That's exactly what they are.
Fair, yeah.
If you want the mentality of your typical black dragon, it is Shrek.
Yes, great call.
So when you're talking about their iconic appearance, black dragons tend to have these big sweeping horns that come down and run along their jawline, towards the front of their face. And their faces seem to be very gaunt, like the skin is sucking into the skull. It gives them a very, grinning skull skeletal look. And according to the Draconomicon, it is because as they get older, the natural acidity of their body actually scours away all of the soft tissue between the bones and the skin. So it's actually literally the skin is sucking down to the skull.
Okay, I like it.
As a great worm, they can reach lengths of up to 85 feet long with an up to 80-foot wingspan. Their diet primarily consists of seafood, but they also really like red meat, but they like to pickle it. So they will kill the thing, and then they will bury it in swamp water for a week and a half. And whenever it gets good and ripe, then they'll go and eat it.
They're going to eat like swamp puppies. I mean, they're going to be like crocodiles or alligators.
Right, yeah. So when it comes to their hoards, the things that they like, black dragons really like coins. They really like shiny coins. And some of the craftier ones have been known to move into lakes or rivers near their lairs, specifically so that they can waylay passing ships and secure tribute.
Oh, okay. So if you're doing like a high seas thing, imagine a black dragon that like ambushes the treasure galleons.
Oh, yeah. So you have this strait that these ships have to pass through. If they don't pass through this strait, it takes like an extra 3 days to go around the Cape, right? So they go through this strait to cut 3 days off their travel. Problem is, it passes by some really marshy land, and there happens to be a really cantankerous black dragon that lives in that really marshy land. And so there's a good chance that your ship is going to get attacked by this really cranky black dragon as you're sailing through.
Yeah. So the coins is one that's held over. Fizbin's actually has a bit on their treasures as well. It says black dragons appreciate objects of cultural, magical, or scientific significance that originated from lost cultures. knowing a relic they possess is coveted by others because it presents a link to a lost past is what gives that relic its value. And so that is their thing is...
That sounds more like green dragons to me, but...
Green dragons do the same, but green dragons are more cultural art, and we can delve into that. But they really like those links to lost things and magical items as well, because people want them. And it's like, you want this, but it's mine, so...
Right. So Draconomicon also goes into mating practices for all of these dragons.
Did you get to see the wonderful dragon video I sent you from TikTok?
I started watching it, and then I thought better of it.
Because they go into some wonderful detail.
Yes, they go into a lot of detail, and I decided that I didn't need that much detail right now. Anyway, the mating practices of black dragons tend to be female black dragons will go and they'll go and be fierce, and they will impress the male dragons who will invite them in for nuptials.
Yeah. Now, taking this into aspect, if you look at actual animal physiology, since the females are going to be fighting, apparently they're going to have a quote-quote harem of males, like, male animals or like living animals would, particularly mammals. This is going to mean that physiologically, your female dragons in this case should actually be significantly larger than your males.
I was about to say that,
okay,
yeah.
Gotcha.
So with black dragons, it's never stated, but I would say that female black dragons would be the larger of the two.
Larger, angrier of,
Yes, absolutely. And then once they have mated, they lay the eggs in the male dragon's lair, and then the male dragon will care for the eggs and then the young after they hatch.
Okay.
So very seahorsey in that aspect.
Yay.
So black dragons are one of the few dragons that have water breathing. They can just naturally breathe underwater, but they don't really tend to do a whole lot of swimming. And that's because swamps tend to be very brackish. They tend to be very dark water. You don't have visibility to go swimming. So they prefer to just wallow in the mud and muck, and they'll settle themselves down in the sediment, and they will wait for things to come by for them to jump out at and eat.
Again, very much like a crocodile or an alligator.
Oh, yes, very much. Now, when you're talking about the other colors of dragons that a black dragon would most likely have to contend with, whether it is encroaching on territory or territories butting up against each other, the most likely ones that they would probably run into would be green dragons like forests. There's a lot of, forests that transition into swamps and such. Bronze dragons, because bronze dragons like coastal areas, and also topaz dragons. I think topaz dragons would be the most likely one of these because they really like salt marshes.
Okay.
They like brackish swamps. They like swamps that, have that salt water intrusion in them. And so I think that it just being swampy, like a mangrove swamp, would be very appealing to both a black dragon and a topaz dragon.
I could see that. So when I was mentioning earlier that I could see several dragon types like in Old Gods of Appalachia, the two that jumped to mind were black dragons and green dragons. And again, where you do have that kind of forest into the lowlands and swamps and salt marshes, either one of these would fit really easy.
Yeah. And so the other thing that I came up with for each of these colors is non-traditional dragon ideas. Okay. So if these dragons are able to take a humanoid aspect, what sort of things are they going to do? Because these are entities that live for centuries, if not millennia. Okay. They're going to get bored.
Yeah.
And so they are going to find things to occupy their time. So one of the ideas that I had, a bog witch. You don't have to have a hag living in the hut out in the swamp. It can be a black dragon.
You would be far better off encountering the hag.
Potentially.
Far better. Yeah, and I kind of get, the Sleeping Beauty and Maleficent, again, where the hag turns into the giant dragon and starts. In that case, it's green flame, but acid works just as good.
Right. Yeah. Then, of course, your swamp, your wilderness guide, the person that you hire to guide you through the swamp so that your paladin doesn't fall off the path and drown.
I could see this. This feels more like a green dragon to me on this one, but yeah.
Not in a swamp.
Not in a swamp, though. No, I agree. Yeah.
Not in a swamp. given our talk about dragons moving out into the lakes and rivers to waylay ships, having him be a pirate or a smuggler.
Absolutely.
And going back to our episode on the Jersey Devil, where you were talking about how the pines in Jersey were used as smugglers' runs.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
That just
To
it just
quote
works.
Hamilton, everything's legal in New Jersey.
And then the last one, and this is one that I just happened to think of, and it tickled me so much that I had to write it down.
Yeah, this one made me giggle.
A Catoblepus farmer / death cheese maker.
Of course.
Because as a dragon, they're going to have a high enough innate magical resistance to not die when the Catoblepus looks at them. So they are going to farm the Catoblepus. They are going to milk the Catoblepus, and they are going to use their ham-flavored milk to make death cheese.
I love it. It's going to be like the new one-chip challenge. You're like, here, try it. Wink, wink. With this, I could think of one more, because Ian asked me to try to think of a couple things as well. I could see this as your shopkeeper in the curio store. I'm thinking like Big Trouble in Little China, or like the guy that has, it's not Mogwai? In Gremlins.
Yeah, the Mogwai.
But that would be a black dragon. Absolutely. Just sitting there in the back with a bunch of, like I said, these lost cultural artifacts that probably have more than a little bit of magic to them. And they're just like, yeah, they would probably be less inclined to actually sell the items. Unless, also, like, I could totally see a black dragon with the Lament configuration. You mustn't play with the box. And somehow the box always just comes back to the merchant.
Yeah. Well, that's because they're secretly one of the...
Cenobites?
Yeah, one of the Cenobites.
Yeah. I could see a dragon as a Cenobite as well. That would totally track.
Yeah.
We have such sights to show you.
Yeah, and we can do it from 20,000 feet. So the next color on our list is the blue dragon. I will admit up front, blue dragons are my personal favorite.
They're in my top 3 or 4 as well.
Yeah, blue dragons are best. Even though I don't want to live where they live. I have no interest in living in the desert.
I love the desert.
But blue dragons are best dragons. So they prefer sandy deserts, but they will live anywhere that is hot and dry. And they have a lightning breath weapon.
That's kind of awesome. And I miss the hot and dry, especially this winter. This winter's been rough.
Yeah, this winter has been kind of rough. Their dominant physical features are that they have a single large craggy horn that erupts from the center of their forehead. So yeah, they're unicorn dragons. And they have these big frilly ears. They're one of the few dragons that actually has external ear anatomy. Most of them just have the ear holes like most lizards do. They grow to be roughly the same size as a black dragon, so up to 85 feet long and up to 80-foot wingspan. They tend to hum and crackle with built-up static electricity. They sound like a transformer or high-voltage power lines. If you've ever walked under high-voltage power lines and you can hear the hum, that's what it would sound like to walk close to a blue dragon.
Nice.
And the sound intensifies and the crackling intensifies whenever they get angry or they're about to attack. And that's when it starts to give off the scent of ozone as, it's sparking. They prefer to... This is one of the reasons why I love them. They are consummate introverts. To avoid unwanted attention, they just burrow in the sand and just hide out in the sand. They leave their horn up and sticking up out of the sand. It tends to look like just a big old jagged rock at a distance. And they have a burrow speed, so they have this big, broad, flat tail that they use as a tool to help propel them through the sand as they're burrowing.
This makes me think of all of like the TikTok videos of like spiders do it, and there's a handful of different lizards that'll do it too. That like they'll sit there and you see them and they kind of burrow, and you see their eyes, and you're just like, I'm getting comped, and they're just kind of. I love that. Those make me happy for some weird reason. Like, yeah, I want to do that too.
Blue dragons are very hierarchical. They are one of the most social of the chromatic dragons. The oldest dragon in a region acts as basically an overlord. They use the term suzerain, which is appropriate because, per definition, it can be the person in charge, or it can be, quote, a dominant state controlling the foreign relations of a vassal state, but allowing it sovereign authority in its internal affairs. So you have to do what boss says, but as long as you do what boss says and what you want to do doesn't conflict with that, you're free to do whatever you want in your territory.
That was largely how Rome handled conquered nations. They weren't necessarily Roman citizens. You were over there. You pay us a tribute. You do your stuff. If we call on you for levies for troops, you send them. If we need you to send money, you send it. But otherwise, you handle your own business.
Yeah. And one of the things about the blue dragons as listed is that if you didn't like them, you didn't typically challenge them for power. You just leave and you go and find another place that either doesn't have a big boss to have to swear fealty to, or one that you actually want to swear fealty to.
I can get with that.
Yeah. And going into the mating rituals, they actually have this big convoluted courtship ritual thing that involves exchange of gifts and making an announcement to all of the other blue dragons in the area and getting the suzerain's permission.
Now, the gifts thing is important, and I don't know if you got into like their treasures and how they do their treasure. I can delve in that to a bit. The gift thing is huge.
Oh, yes. The thing that they love the most is gemstones, specifically sapphires.
Yes.
They love them some sapphires.
Yeah. So again, they like things that are blue themed. They like cultural
Dabu-dee,
things as
dabu-die.
well. Dabu-dee-da. Yes, exactly. If they were green, they would die. No, that actually brings up a good point because one of the things you can do to absolutely piss off a blue dragon is offer it a gift it thinks is beneath it or that it doesn't like. So if you went up and you had like this awesome like emerald carving, like, hey, blue dragon, emerald, and now it's going to eat your face. And so that gift offering between dragon, it's like, are you offering me a gift that is proper to my station? Because the blue dragons specifically are very haughty as well. And again, they do find that hierarchy very important. So if you give them something that's below where they think they should be offered, that will insult them as well.
Yes. So whenever they lay their eggs, they tend to stay together as a pair and they will raise the young together. They are the most family oriented of the dragons.
Yay, dragon family.
Yep. They tend to be very attentive parents. They rarely leave the eggs. And then they will raise the young until they hit what would be considered adulthood. And then they chase them off and say, okay, now it is your turn to go and do your own thing.
You're 18, get out of the house.
Yep, pretty much. They are ambush predators, much like black dragons are. They prefer to cook their meat with their lightning breath whenever possible. Their favorite food is herd animals like camels. So they really like caravans.
Understandable.
Because caravans are a buffet and a shopping trip all at once.
Yes, it's the best.
And their preferred hunting techniques are to either swoop in from the air or to burrow under the ground and then pop out at them.
Surprise!
Yeah. And so older dragons will combine that technique with things like hallucinatory terrain to hide their presence.
That's awesome. I love it.
And they will also use things like ventriloquism and mimicry to try and split up a larger group into smaller groups that are easier for it to take out piecemeal.
We call that bite size.
Yes, absolutely. So they are one of the dragons that rarely retreat. Blues and reds are the two that rarely will retreat from a fight because they have that ego involved. It is a pride and an honor thing that you don't run from a fight. But blue dragons are at least going to run away if they get hurt bad enough. If it is obvious that they cannot win, they will run away to fight another day. They are not going to stand their ground and pride be damned and die rather than flee.
No, they do have some self-preservation instinct.
A little bit, yeah. So whenever talking about dealing with other dragons, the most common ones that they're going to run into are brass dragons. Because brass dragons are the other ones that really like these dry, arid locations.
Now, see, brass dragons for me are also high on that list for me as well, so...
Yeah, brass dragons are pretty cool. And depending on the type of desert that you're talking about, they might run into some bronze dragons or topaz dragons if their desert ends up coming up to the coastline. So talking about like Northern Africa where it comes up on the Mediterranean.
Yeah.
Or possibly some red, copper, or sapphire dragons if they are coming up on some mountainous areas.
I could see some like red and blue interactions like in Nevada, and you got the high desert like Nevada,
Exactly.
Utah, that area. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Or, talking about like the Gobi Desert where
Holy
it's,
crap. It's a red dragon. Well, we'll get to red dragons, but red dragons in the middle of Las Vegas would be perfect.
oh yeah, absolutely. um, Talking about the fact that they like gemstones and that sapphire dragons really like deep caves.
Yeah.
So they're probably not going to hit too many instances where they're running into sapphire dragons, but there is that possibility. Combining the two, I think it would be really cool to have like a really old blue dragon that has a sapphire dragon egg in its hoard.
Okay, I could see that. I could totally see that. Because again, aside from the gems, they like things that depict blue in general. So they are going to go for fine art. They are going to go for textiles as well. So that egg is going to be kind of gemmy. So I mean, it's obviously going to look like a giant sapphire carving. That would fit perfectly. I could see also as a snub to a lesser dragon.
Oh yes.
Just as a pure like, I've got it. What the hell are you going to do about it?
This is my trophy.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
could totally see it rocking that way.
Yeah, my trophy is this 85-pound sapphire cabochon that I have sitting here.
Well, I'm just thinking, so actually in one of my Facebook pages I've seen someone had a picture, they didn't know what it was, but it's a what they call a Lindy sapphire. They're lab generated, but it's an artificial star sapphire. And other than the fact it's lab created, they're absolutely gorgeous and they get that bright, like 4-pointed star when the light hits it. And I could totally see that's what this egg would look like.
Yeah. So some non-traditional blue dragon ideas. I mean, first off would be the obvious one, a desert guide.
Yeah.
Someone to escort you through the desert, especially since, at least in 3rd edition, I don't know if still in 5th edition, in 3rd edition, they had the ability to create and destroy water as an innate ability.
Well, I mean, you're in the desert.
Right. So, depending on their motivations with this group, they could either use create water to sustain the people that they're escorting and make sure they make it across safely, or they can destroy water to strand them out in the middle of the desert and then pick apart their corpses.
I can see that. I'm also going to throw a call back to the beginning of the episode. If it's a party full of bard, they're going to use create water and just drown the party.
I don't think create water makes that much water.
They're a dragon.
Yeah. Next thing, this is one that I really liked, an archaeologist.
I can see that.
Because deserts are really good at preserving a lot of artifacts, especially if it's not on the surface where sandstorms are going to abrade it.
Okay.
And if this dragon is old enough, they might be the reason why a good number of these things are in the ground in the first place. It'd be sort of, having the crib notes on where everything is buried.
Absolutely.
And it could just be one of those things where like, yeah, I had these things and I buried them in this general location. But that was like 300 years ago. And I don't remember exactly where I buried them, but I really need them now.
If you find it for me, I might give you a piece.
Yeah.
Like it.
Then a couple more artsy things, glass blowers and lapidaries.
Both of those would make a lot of sense.
Because one thing that they're able to do with their lightning, specifically their lightning breath, is they can turn sand into glass.
Yeah.
And you get that lightning glass, the jaggedy glass that you get from lightning strikes out in the desert. They are capable of generating that. If their breath is hot enough to do that, I don't see a reason why they wouldn't find a way to harness that for artistic purposes.
No, absolutely.
And then lapidary, for a similar reason, they like to collect gems. Why would they not want to try and do some gem cutting and, make some art with it?
Absolutely. One more thing, and it does kind of tie into your archaeologist, but I could totally see a blue dragon either being the head or the curator for a museum. Because this way they could display their giant hoard. They'd preserve everything they have, and they can say, I've got this stuff. But more specifically, you don't. And look at the things from history I have found that you can only imagine, and you could never imagine touching or having anything close to this good. And it's a way to like one up everybody else around them.
Or, a fashion designer.
Yeah.
Sort of like Tiffany Cartier.
Yeah, with everything's blue.
Yeah, everything is blue.
I love it. Totally would have all the Picassos in his blue face.
Oh, yeah. So next up are the green dragons. they have a little bar in the Shire. Anyway, so green dragons prefer to live in forests. The older, the better. And they have poison breath. They are the only dragons in the basic 10 box set of chromatic and metallic that have a poison breath weapon.
Yeah. And I like blue dragons, but I almost like green just a little bit better.
I really like green dragons too, but I am partial to blue.
Yeah.
They really like to make their lairs in locations that are hidden by dense foliage. Older dragons have the ability to magically grow plants to cover their lairs, but because they also are able to water breathe. So a lot of them, what they like to do is lair in caves that have underwater entrances, or they're hidden behind waterfalls or various water features so that they're harder to find.
Okay.
So green dragons don't really have horns on the tops of their heads, but they have these little hornlet like spikes that run along their brow ridges, along the edges of some of their larger scales, especially around their neck.
And it's like the ridges they have on the Dilophosaurus in the first Jurassic Park.
Yeah. And then they have a central crest ridge that runs from right behind their head, and it goes all the way down their back to the tip of their tail.
Nice. So again, going back to early in the episodes where I said, the two dragons I could really see in Old Gods of Appalachia, I could totally see a green dragon, especially like in the middle of summertime where it's hot and it's humid and that kudzu's everywhere and it's like growing so fast you can almost physically watch it grow. That totally would be where a green dragon was. Maybe a younger green dragon, but totally a green dragon chilling right through there.
Oh, yeah. And especially if you're getting away from the chromatic equals evil.
Yeah.
A green dragon would absolutely be an advocate of the green.
Yes.
In Old Gods, whereas the black dragon would be an agent of the inner dark.
Makes sense.
I mean, it's almost too on the nose. So green dragons carry around them this odor of chlorine. So they smell like a swimming pool.
That'll happen.
And while it is never actually specified, I don't think it might be in one of the really old editions, but I don't think it's ever specified. It is assumed that their poison breath weapon is chlorine gas.
That would make perfect sense. I don't think I've ever read anything that said that specifically, but honestly, if they're just huffing out some mustard gas, yeah.
I mean, we've read the accounts of World War I. We know what chlorine gas does.
Yeah, it's not fun.
It's nasty. It is nasty, nasty stuff. So green dragons are considered the most intelligent of the chromatic dragons, and they tend to excel in intrigue and politics. So whenever they're dealing with others, they tend to be very smooth talking and sophisticated. But whenever they are dealing with other green dragons, especially green dragons that are basically peers, so of a similar age and power level or status, they go total dude bro. They tend to be loud, crass, and generally rude.
Okay.
And while they don't actually have a formal hierarchy, which is really odd considering that they are considered one of the most lawful of the dragons, they all know exactly where they stand in relation to the other green dragons in the neighborhood in the pecking order.
Yeah.
And so apparently they don't really have anything along the line of courting rituals, but
that we know of.
Again,
that high intelligence is probably something super subtle.
It is, especially because when they pair off, they form a really tight bonded pair.
Yeah.
And they will take extreme, like almost helicopter parent levels of care over this clutch of eggs.
This is that couple that only speaks the inside jokes.
Yes. That, infuriates everyone around them. So they take care of the eggs together. They raise this brood together. They teach them all about, how to communicate and how to manipulate and how to double deal. And they will often have additional clutches during this time who they almost completely ignore.
Favorite child, not favorite child.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. They play favorites with their children. Absolutely. And so I want the story of the second batch.
The middle child green dragon.
Yeah, I want the second clutch story.
Yes, absolutely.
Of these green dragons. That's what I really want. And so once they have raised this clutch and they have sent them off into the wild, then they tend to just split apart and go their separate ways. Their job is done. And then, they will be neighbors for a while, but according to the book, it takes about 60-ish years before they start conniving and scheming against one another to, try and take territory from one another.
Proper sibling rivalry.
Oh, no, this is the parents.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So green dragons aren't picky about what they will hoard.
Now, see, I've read different. While they're not super selective, they do prefer actually handcrafted items. They like carvings. They like things that are hand painted, things that are actually produced versus just naturally laying about.
Right. Well, that must be the 5th edition variation on it, because in 3rd edition, what they want are objects of power.
Ooh.
Not necessarily just magical power, but things that have a power of influence, things that are important. So like relics. They want items of cultural significance. And so that's the sort of things that they hoard.
I've got from Fizbin's, green dragons relish gems and jewelries whose palettes reflect their chosen forest environments, favoring viridescent colors, bursts of floral brilliance. Many develop vast collections of emeralds and beryls. Beryls are like aquamarine and other stones like that, punctuated by amber, red rubies, and tiger eyes, bismuth, and the like. Likewise, they covet finely crafted items and works of art depicting unspoiled nature.
Yeah, see, that's why I was saying, what you were saying about the black dragon sounded a lot like what I had on the green dragon, because apparently they have updated the hordes in
the same probability drive. We're good.
Yeah. In the 20 years between the two books were published.
Yeah.
Green dragons are extremely territorial.
Yes.
They will often attack with little to no provocation. They like to stalk their victims. They like turning it into a game.
Absolutely. They very much cat and mouse.
Yes. The most dangerous game is like a how-to manual for a green dragon.
Absolutely.
And whenever they stalk and hunt a group, they usually try to leave at least one person in that group alive and dominated, whether it is magical domination through enchantment magic or by sheer intimidation.
Sure.
And they do this because they want to interrogate them. They want to know what's going on in the world outside the forest. Is there any chance of big shipments of valuables coming through? Are there any hoards or stockpiles of valuable things buried nearby? Things of that nature.
And I think that kind of awareness of culture and surroundings kind of ties into that. One, it ties into their intelligence, but it also ties into their natural proclivity for political intrigue.
Yes. And they are also known for actually ransoming back their victims if they are important and wealthy enough.
Well, I mean, you get more money that way.
Yeah. Per the 3rd edition Draconomicon, their preferred foods are sentient. Greens and reds are both ones that they state that their preferred foods are people.
Yeah.
Specifically, in the case of green dragons, elves and sprites.
Well, you're going to find them in a forest more frequently.
Exactly. But they are omnivores, and they're capable of eating even shrubs and small trees.
Well, some days you'll want a salad.
So the colors of dragons that they are most likely to run into would be black. We talked about that already a little bit. Copper and amethyst dragons. Copper dragons, again, they like to live in foothills. Forests overlap foothills quite frequently. And then amethyst dragons like living in ponds and lakes and pools. So there are lots of open glades and things like that where you have these little pristine little ponds and lakes out in the middle of the woods.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't be remiss to have an amethyst and a green bumping up against one another. We ended up choosing to pit a green and a copper against one another in our town of Verdigris. Part of that was the thematics of it, because it's Verdigris, which is the green oxidation on copper, but also because it just worked.
It really did.
And I'd have to go back and check my docs, but I'm pretty sure that the green dragon in that particular module that we've been writing, I'm pretty sure they're lawful neutral. I don't think that they're lawful evil. They moved in because it was unoccupied.
Yeah.
And then the owner turns up. And so now they have this cold war between the two of them where neither one of them wants to reveal that they're actually a dragon. but they both want the other one dealt with and kicked out.
Oh, absolutely.
So the non-traditional green dragon ideas that we came up with. The first one I came up with was a game warden.
Makes perfect sense.
Especially if you want to get away from that green dragons like to eat people vibe.
Okay.
A game warden is somebody who is going to be focused on husbandry to maintain healthy populations, especially of large game, so that they have something to eat.
Okay.
In a similar vein, they might be a forester, selectively harvesting trees out of their forest to provide healthier growing conditions for the older growth trees and the income that harvesting trees provides, especially since the older dragons are able to magically influence the growth of plants.
Yeah. I like this too. I could also see a green dragon as like a firewatch in a forester, and perhaps there's a red dragon up in the mountains. And so like they're acting as firewatch, but again, maybe they have another standoff, much like with our copper dragon, maybe there's a standoff with the red dragon. And so they're acting as a firewatch.
Yeah, that could be a good one too. One that was a little bit unconventional, water treatment.
Yeah.
I mean, they have chlorine breath.
I like it. Fresh water for everyone.
Yeah, they are the water treatment plant for this town. The water comes in, they pull it out from the river into this big reservoir, and then a couple times a day he just comes in, dunks his head into the pool
The
and
giant bucket.
and just full on chlorine breath weapons into this 55,000 gallon drum of water, and it dilutes it just to the point where it is sanitary and safe to drink.
I can imagine like these giant green bubbles, like you're blowing bubbles and
Yeah, borrowing from the black dragon, a forest witch, or
again, perfect sense.
or the head of a druid circle.
Yeah.
They would also be good for that. And then the one that I really like, because I was really trying to think outside the box, a poli-sci professor, a political science professor.
Would make perfect sense.
So this is the person that everyone with money sends their kids to learn statecraft.
So yeah, they're like the dean at Harvard or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is Machiavelli was a green dragon.
Yes, I could totally see that. That would make perfect sense. So two, I thought up, one ties in with your game warden, but I was thinking like the leader of one of those hippie communes, like so they're secluded, keep everyone kind of out, but this is our area. The other thing, talking about, again, leaning into that intelligence and that knowing your level and where you compare, this would be like the old man or woman in the middle of Central Park playing chess against people.
Okay.
And so that's what they do, is they just like engage in these games of wit as their pastime, but it's also where they can kind of rate and gauge where everybody else around them stand.
Right. Yeah. And being the person sitting playing chess in the middle of the park all day, every day, that is a great way to pick up some gossip, yo.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Moving on. The next one is the red dragon.
Red dragon. Oh, wait.
Yum. So red dragons are probably the most iconic of the dragons, especially in D&D. They like to live in the mountains. They have fire breath. They're big. They're red. There's been a red dragon on the cover of, I think, at least one book in every edition. I mean, I'm pretty sure that it's a red dragon on the cover of the Draconomicon.
Probably, yeah.
Yes, it is a red dragon on the cover of the Draconomicon in 3rd edition. There's a red dragon is it on the cover of the DMG in 5th edition?
The current DMG? Got the digital book. Red dragon on Fizzbins. Let's see here.
Well, I have the alternate art for Fizzbins, so...
Quick correction, there is not a red dragon on the Dungeon Master's Guide. That is Acererak the Lich on the 5th edition Dungeon Master's Guide. What I was thinking of was the DM screen. There is a red dragon on the Dungeon Master screen.
There's a red dragon on Fizzbins. Coming through, there's a red dragon on... Strangely enough, it looks red for Rise of Tiamat.
I mean, the dragon that they put in the D&D movie was a red dragon.
Yeah.
There is a brief black dragon as well, but the chunky dragon.
I love that big chunky dragon. He made me happy.
What was his name? Thimbershoud, I think?
Yeah.
Something like that. Lord, he coming.
Oh, Lord, him a coming.
Yeah, he's a red dragon. So red dragons are the largest of the chromatic dragons. They were the only ones in the 3rd edition book that actually had a colossal size category. They went past gargantuan into colossal.
They get big.
Yeah, capable of reaching up to 120 feet in length and up to 150-foot wingspan.
That's just, oh my god, that's like your whole map.
Exactly. Yes.
Just throw your puppy on the table and have your minis fight against a puppy, and you're fine.
Only if it's the size of a football.
Oh yeah, only. And they'll survive about as well.
They have sort of a beaked end of their mouth, and they've got these back swept horns and these jaw frills. It's actually an ear frill that ends up growing down their jaw as they get older. And they, like green dragons, I think I forgot to mention this, red and green dragons both have forked tongues.
Okay.
They're the only ones that I've found so far that actually specifically mention them having forked tongues. And they tend to have sort of a little flicker of flame going on in their nostrils all the time. That will amplify and grow, and it'll start to backlight their eyes whenever they get really angry. And they will emit the smell of sulfur, and they have this sort of heat shimmer that comes off of them as they're warming up, as they're literally getting angry.
Okay.
They are seen as the archetypal evil dragon. They have the avarice, they have the ferocity, they have the vengeful nature, they have the wanton destruction going on. And they buy into it. They hold themselves to that ideal that they are the draconic ideal and all other dragons are inferior to them.
Yeah, so I mean, again, your red dragons are going to be kind of your stronger, beefier, more physical dragons as well. And they go very much the opposite route of the green dragon. The green dragon could definitely think circles around a red dragon. But if it went toe-to-toe to a fight, I think the green dragon would be smart enough not to get into a toe-to-toe fight with the red dragon, if at all avoidable.
Not without a whole lot of prior preparation and a lot of treachery ready to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, because red dragons are very much a might makes right sort of mentality. I mean, to the point where it is stated that they feel that if you can take it and you can defend it, it is yours.
Very much pulling up Hobbes and Locke in the Age of Enlightenment.
Right. They also seem to have an eidetic memory with regards to their hordes. They can remember exactly what is in their horde at all times. They can remember how much it's worth, when and how they acquired it, where it is located within their horde, down to individual coins.
Okay.
And so it is not unreasonable. I mean, it's an unreasonable thing for an entity to do, but it is not unreasonable for a red dragon if someone manages to sneak in and steal a single coin.
Like a little hobbit.
Like a little hobbit or a ring, because Smaug was a red dragon.
Yes.
Then they will go on a rampage to find and kill the thief. And if they can't find and kill the thief, they will burn down the countryside and anywhere that they think might be people who helped the thief get away.
Take a toddler, make it 150 feet by 180 feet, paint it red, and give it a fire breath. And that's basically what we got.
Right. Yes. So red dragons, being very prideful creatures, they have to work to maintain their status and reputation. Any sort of slight or injury that is left unanswered is seen as a sign of weakness in the eyes of other dragons, and it will be acted upon. Other dragons will take advantage of that and will pressure that dragon and will ultimately try to kill them and take their horde. And it's one of the reasons why they tend to be so violent, is because this overreaction within red dragon culture, as portrayed in the books, isn't seen as overreacting. It's not seen as this petulant tantrum. It is seen as a display of power.
Right.
And so they are solitary creatures. They are incredibly territorial. Entering a red dragon's domain without invitation is
ill-advised.
It's sufficient provocation to be attacked. They are only slightly less likely to attack you than a green dragon, but only slightly. Ironically, they do also tend to seek information of the outside world, so they will employ lesser creatures to act as spies and informants and messengers. But they are also notorious for eating said spies, informants, and messengers if they don't like what they hear.
It's not a great job.
It isn't. But because of their territorial nature, courtship between red dragons is a really perilous affair. And it tends to be a case where a younger dragon will approach an established older dragon and will make their move very carefully, trying to ingratiate themselves with this older dragon in hopes of securing a mate.
And here's to you, Mrs. Robinson.
Exactly. And whenever they pair up and they have a clutch of eggs, it becomes the younger dragon's responsibility to take care of the eggs and to raise the young. It's like, you came to me wanting kids, you get to take care of them.
Fair.
And like with green dragons, their preferred meal is sentient, specifically human and elven youths. Playing into the sacrifice a virgin to the dragon. The way I like to think of it is that it's purely a power play. They say that they taste better, but I think it's purely a power play of, look, I can make them sacrifice their children. Look how pathetic they are.
I could totally see that. Yeah, see, a red dragon might not be evil, but it's almost certainly going to be an asshole.
Oh yeah, almost certainly. But I mean, I can definitely see a world where they aren't. Like John Wick. I think John Wick would be a red dragon.
Yeah, okay, yeah, fair. Yeah, you done kicked his puppy, you tried to steal his car, and now he's just going to erase everything about you.
Yes, he's just going to erase your bloodline from the map.
Fair, no. John Wick as a red dragon, I'll buy into it. I like it.
So they are incredibly fierce fighters. They do not retreat or compromise once battle has commenced, because retreating is a sign of weakness. Weakness results in loss of status. Loss of status for a red dragon is equivalent to death.
Especially because if you lose a battle or you retreat from battle, you're probably wounded, and red dragons, I was going to discuss, are going to try to push and steal from a weaker red dragon anyway.
Absolutely, yes. You're opening yourself up for an attack in your lair.
Yeah, absolutely.
But they are capable of recognizing a superior foe, and they know when discretion is the better part of valor, so they will not engage in that fight.
Yeah, a lot of posturing probably.
Oh, yes.
It'd be like those two college chads, sitting there thumping their chest, they're close enough they could be kissing, and neither one's going to throw a punch, but they're sitting there and they're trying to show off.
Yeah, pretty much. But when dealing with a clearly weaker foe, they may try to intimidate or bully them to get a service, information, or tribute out of them without having to fight them.
And then they eat them.
Not always.
Not always, depending on what the information is.
And yeah, it depends on how good what they do is.
Yeah.
If they're useful, you don't break useful tools.
Yeah.
And another very important thing is that they often do not slay every foe they meet, because if the outcome is clear, they will let some survivors run away so as to spread the word of the dragon's deeds and in turn improve their status.
Absolutely.
There can be no great tales if there are no survivors.
Yeah.
Now, talking about dragons that they would come into competition with, ones that they would most likely come into competition with would be other red dragons, obviously. But they would also have some interactions with gold dragons, with copper dragons, and with emerald dragons. Especially emerald dragons, because emerald dragons like to live in volcanoes.
Oh, yeah, that's going to be an issue.
They would possibly seek out conflict with gold dragons, because gold dragons have the similar mindset of being the superior ideal of dragonkind.
Yeah, yeah.
Being the largest and most powerful of the metallic dragons.
Yeah, and traditionally they're good, but they're still kind of assholes.
Yeah, you would have this giant draconic dick measuring contest.
You really would.
Is what it would come down to. Especially since both of them are immune to fire because they both breathe fire.
Yeah.
So it would literally be how badly they could physically beat each other up.
Yes.
Because their breath weapons would be useless against one another. And while less likely, there are interactions between red and white dragons, especially in frozen locations, because white dragons really like frozen mountains. Red dragons tend to leave white dragons alone most of the time. They see white dragons as being beneath them because they are more animalistic.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And because, unless that white dragon is really a whole lot more powerful than them, they don't get anything from fighting them.
Yeah.
And also potentially sapphire dragons. Again, sapphire dragons like deep caves. Deep caves, you find them under mountains.
Thanks, dwarves. You just
Yeah.
summoned both. Good job.
Or, again, bronze dragons. So
Okay.
if you have like a mountainous island chain, you would have the potential for conflict between red and bronze dragons.
Okay.
So some of the non-traditional red dragon ideas. The first one is a banker or a moneylender.
Yeah.
They keep immaculate records. They know exactly how much money they have. They know exactly who has it. And they know that they can get their money back at any time.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes perfect sense.
And then transitioning into that more artistic endeavors, goldsmith or silversmith.
Yeah.
They have all this coinage in their hoard just laying around. They're, naturally imbued with fire. Why not?
Yeah.
One thing that I really think would be an interesting one would be a monster hunter or actually an adventurer.
Okay.
Specifically taking that aspect form, that humanoid form, just to show that they are so powerful that they don't even need their draconic body to beat all of these other lesser creatures.
I like this, but do you know what I see when I read this? What I immediately pictured in my mind was the rabbit from Monty Python and the Holy Grail. That was a red dragon.
It could be.
I'm going to kill your entire party as a bunny.
Because I can.
Exactly.
And then the most obvious one would be sort of an emperor/conqueror sort of thing.
Yeah.
It may not be terribly non-traditional, but the combined ego and power of a red dragon and that cult of personality that they draw to themselves, especially with, kobolds and dragonborn and other reptilian folk, that just screams God Emperor Faerun.
Yes.
So did you have anything for...
I didn't have anything extra for the Reds. I don't know. My brain just doesn't go towards the Reds. I mean, the Reds are so iconic and what they do.
It was hard.
Yeah, Reds are.
It was
are
hard for me to come up with stuff.
Yeah.
It really was. The Monster Hunter idea actually came from a home game that I had where that was actually an ancient bronze dragon that I had in my game who was a renowned mercenary captain.
Okay.
And that was his thing because they have that same sort of bravado mindset as the red dragons do. And his whole thing was, look at me, I am such a formidable combatant that I don't even have to rely on my draconic form to defeat you.
No, that would make sense. And again, the other thing I would think of would be kind of like the Jimbro or the Chad, but that really does tie more into the White Dragon. Because again, as just generally dickish as the Red Dragons are, they do have like a 24 intelligence. So, I mean, they're not stupid by any stretch, especially when you get to like the Great Worms, they're hyper intelligent. I think they're 21. But, I mean, they're extremely intelligent. And so, yeah, like I said, a conqueror, a strategist, nothing that's just purely physical, but it would definitely be something that would domineer and very flashy.
Yeah, they would absolutely rock an Oath of Conquest Paladin.
Yes.
That would be their PC class.
Yeah.
As an adventurer, they would be an Oath of Conquest Paladin. Getting into the last one here, because we are starting to go a little long. White dragons are the smallest, the least intelligent, and the most animalistic of the chromatic dragons. And they have a cold breath. They have this sort of sleek, muscular profile, and their skulls tend to be very, almost chitinous in the scales that they have, these big, meaty scales that they have on their head, and this single large crest that comes off the base of their skull. But the rest of their hide tends to be almost more leathery than scaly. And while their scales are very much white, the membranes of their wings tend to transition to almost a pink or a blue as they reach the edges.
See, that sounds amazing. I would love to see one of these.
Oh, yeah. From a distance.
No, I want to boop the snoot. What are you talking about? Boop.
So they are the smallest of the dragons. Their max wingspan per 3rd edition was 72 feet.
Just a mere 72 feet.
I know, right? Their max length was 85 feet, but most of that was tail.
Okay.
They had very long, whippy tails. They had like a 35-foot long tail. They prefer to lair in ice caves or underneath frozen tundra, anywhere they can get away from the heat of the sun. So yeah, they're Irish. They spurn the day star. Actually, I guess they would be Icelandic.
Yeah. They're goth.
They absolutely are.
White dragon goth.
Yeah. They are carnivores, and they will only eat meat that is thoroughly frozen. So they are known to store their kills in like snowbanks and hide them in fissures in glaciers, using the terrain around their lair as basically a larder to preserve their food until it's frozen enough for them to be ready to eat it.
I like it.
So white dragons are generally considered antisocial, except when dealing with the opposite sex. The way I read it is they're here for a good time, not a long time. Because they do also have the shortest average lifespan of all of the chromatic dragons.
Yeah.
So they're known for having casual hookups, and then they'll have a batch of eggs, and they'll just sort of kind of halfway take a look at them every so often. They'll just sort of tuck them away out near their lair somewhere.
They're there. They're watching the tablet. They're fine.
Yeah. And when they hatch, they'll basically just, keep half an eye on them, make sure they don't kill themselves. But other than that, they're on their own. They need to figure out how to do it themselves. They are the opposite of the green in every possible way in that regard.
Yes. Or even the blues, honestly.
Yeah,
I mean,
I guess so.
The greens have their second clutch, and their second clutch they treat like the white dragons. That's
Kinda,
it.
yeah.
We're gonna find that middle dragon. You treat me like a white dragon.
Yeah. So their preferred treasure that they like to hoard are anything that reminds them of the shine and shimmer of ice. So they really like diamonds.
Diamonds, quartz, cut glass.
But they also like silver and platinum.
Yeah.
So they are like me in the fact that they prefer the silver metals to the gold metals.
Yeah. I'm on that line too.
And while they are less intelligent than other chromatic dragons, they aren't idiots. So an adult white dragon is on par average intelligence of a human.
Yeah, an adult's going to have an intel hitting around 8 to 10. Now, when you get to worm status, you're up to about 14.
Right. But that is also average stat blocks. So
Yeah.
there's going to be variation there. If you want to have an 18 intelligence white dragon,
Do it.
rock it.
Yeah,
Even young dragons are far more intelligent than other predators.
absolutely.
So yeah, they may be very animalistic, but you're talking about, this is basically a flying wolf with an intelligence of 7 or 8,
Yeah, that would make sense.
as opposed to an intelligence of 3.
Yeah,
It's a
they're still scary.
Yeah, and it's going to be a clutch, so there's going to be more than one of them, and so they are going to coordinate. They are going to effectively use pack tactics very intentionally.
Again, to reference Jurassic Park, these are going to be about at the intelligence level of Velociraptor.
They're going to be clever girls.
Yes, they actually might be a touch above Velociraptor, honestly.
Another point that they list in the Draconomicon is that they have exceptional memories,
Yeah.
especially for events that they have witnessed or experienced firsthand.
What are they doing? Learning.
Yeah.
But at this point, I think it's more of that wisdom, like that
Yes.
learning scenarios of what's going to happen. It's not like an intellectual abstract intelligence. It is a situational awareness type learning.
Yeah. And so while they lack planning and foresight, they are exceptionally cunning and observant.
Yes.
And they have very similar hunting techniques to blue dragons, in that they like to either swoop down on prey from above or leap out from ambush out of water, snow, or ice.
Scary snowman.
Yeah. I mean, just think about it. You're trudging through the snow. You hate everything because you're trudging through the snow. And then a 15-foot long white dragon jumps out of the snowbank and tries to eat you.
Oh, fuck. I quit. I'm done.
Exactly. So when it comes to territorial conflicts, white dragons most commonly bump up against territories of red dragons or silver dragons. Silver dragons are one of the few that want to be out in the cold too. And white dragons really like lairing in caves in frozen mountains, which is pretty much where red dragons want to be. And as I mentioned before, red dragons tend to leave them be, seeing them as basically unworthy of fighting, because it's like fighting the village idiot. There's no honor to be gained from this.
I mean, they're so much smaller and they're less intelligent that there's just not. It'd be like kicking a puppy.
Yeah, and basically, as long as the white dragon is minding its own business and leaving the red dragon alone and not being a nuisance, the red dragon's just going to let him be there.
Okay.
Because if nothing else, the white dragon is going to help keep the riffraff out.
Fair.
The other one that they're really likely to come into contact with are crystal dragons, because crystal dragons also like this sort of frozen terrain.
They can keep it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can definitely see them potentially coming up against a copper dragon or a bronze dragon if their domain butts up against some hilly land or the ocean. Possibly even a green dragon if you got sort of a taiga situation going on.
Okay.
And now for some non-traditional white dragon ideas. I went very blue collar on this.
Okay.
Because that's where my brain went with the common sense, not a lot of book learning going on. So the first one is a fisherman. I want to see a white dragon as the captain of a crab boat.
Yes, I like it.
I want a white dragon on the cast of Deadliest Catch.
Yes.
They're just running their crab boat and they're catching king crab, and this is the most spectacular thing that I have ever seen. Another thing, fur trappers.
Okay.
Because A, they have a frost breath. They can kill the thing without marring the hide.
That makes perfect sense.
And 2, they don't need to have the hide on it to eat it.
Yeah.
All of the good eaten parts
Are inside.
are inside the fur.
Yeah.
So you might as well not eat the fur, eat everything else, sell the fur for treasure, build the hoard. This is a win-win.
Yeah.
Another one, lore keepers. So, the keeper of oral histories, because of their exceptional memories and long lifespans.
I like that one.
And then the final one, the one that I really liked, is a healer. Specifically, the entity that you bring your buddy to when your buddy bites it.
Because they have the 1,000 gold pieces of diamonds just like
because they have diamonds.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
Now, imagine a white dragon with a religious streak.
Okay.
A white dragon who has levels in cleric.
Ooh, okay.
And a hoard of diamonds.
I can bring back everyone.
Imagine what that dragon could leverage out of an adventuring party in return for resurrecting their friend.
Yes. I love it.
Yeah, that's perfect for me.
So the two I came up with, the first one is like the influencer, kind of like Kim Kardashian, or you had mentioned Jake Paul when I came up with that, or Paris Hilton.
Yeah, I think that like a Logan Paul or a Joe Rogan sort of someone with more machismo.
Yeah, well, they've got the machismo, they've got money, and it's like, who the hell is this person? Where's this money come from? And they're kind of in the limelight, but they're kind of vacuous behind the eyes still. And again, with all the hookup type stuff, so they absolutely have a sex tape out there, if not 3 or 4 of them.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I can see that. The other thing, too, is I've only seen them once or twice here in Tennessee. They have a ton of them up in Jersey. But was it Swanson? The frozen truck food vendors. Like, they drive around and they've got that huge thing of just frozen food. Like, I could see one as a butcher, too, would be a very perfect, like, everyday
Capital
blue
Meats.
collar. Yeah. But he's, hey, I've got this giant thing of frozen food, and I'll sell you some frozen food.
Yeah, I will sell you frozen steaks at wholesale.
Yes.
Yeah, that is absolutely something that they would do. Because of their mental stats, their charisma is their highest stat.
Yeah.
I think in the monster manual, an adult white dragon, or was it an ancient white dragon, whatever the biggest one in the monster manual is, has a charisma of 14.
That's the adult.
Yeah, so I think it was intelligence 10, wisdom 13, charisma 14.
Yeah, I could totally see like this frozen food guy sitting there going door to door selling frozen meats and like trying to snooze up, the stay-at-home dad / stay-at-home mom, because that's what they do.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
They are the milkman of the 60s.
Heck, they could just be the milkman.
Yeah, they could just be the milkman.
I mean, that requires refrigeration too.
It does.
They just have this giant block of copper that just sits in the middle of their cart. And every hour or so, they just breathe their ice breath on this chunk of copper to super chill it. And it just refrigerates their entire cart for an hour while they go out doing their business.
I've got the kids on bike scenario with their dragon. It's going to be a white dragon, and they can either be helping or trying to foil, either way. But it's the summer ice cream dude with the ice cream truck.
Yes, absolutely. Especially since around here we have the creepy ice cream guy, which is this extra long Dodge van. And it has a gas generator on a platform bolted to the back of the van that runs the freezers on the inside of the van. And because they are royalty free, it plays Christmas music.
Oh, okay, yeah. So your next Kids on Bike scenario you have at the library, and this is what we're running.
Yeah, that guy is a white dragon. So there's our chromatic dragons for tonight. We went a little long.
We did.
So we've been talking for a while. Next one we're going to do is going to be the metallics, because those are the two big ones. And then we'll do the gem after that, and whatever we happen to come up to after that. I know I want to touch on some of the planar dragons. I want to touch on some of the other, because there are other dragons from the 2nd edition Monster Manual. There's other dragons in the 3rd edition Draconomicon. There's other dragons in the 5th edition Fizban's Treasury. We got dragon turtles. We got pseudo dragons. We got a whole bunch of different things that are dragon adjacent that we can talk about. And I'm still trying to figure out which creator it was. There was a content creator on TikTok who was talking about how dragons aren't a creature type, they are a narrative tool.
Okay.
So a dragon is anything that fulfills the role of what you would use a dragon for.
Fair. Okay.
And he just put it a whole lot more eloquently than me, and I was trying to find it again so I could reference it, but I haven't been able to find it again yet.
Next week.
Yeah, maybe. So anyway, thank you for joining us on part 1 of our dragon escapades as I ramble on here at the end. If you have any comments, suggestions, or ideas, send us an email, undercommontaste@gmail.com, or come join our Discord. You can find a link to our Discord along with all of our social media through our website, undercommontaste.com. You can also find links there to our itch page, undercommontaste.itch.io, or our Patreon, patreon.com/undercommontaste.
If this is your first time, welcome. We're so glad you joined us. If you enjoyed what you heard, you can find our other episodes, or if you're looking forward to our future Dragon episodes, just go on your podcatcher of choice and search Under Common Taste. As always, give us a rating and review. This helps increase our visibility and lets us know what you want to hear more of.
Stay safe, everyone. Avoid the dragon attacks, and we will see you in 2 weeks.
Happy gaming.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Under Common Taste. Our theme song is Massacre Anne, written and performed by Mary Kroll and used with permission. You can find Mary online at marykroll.bandcamp.com or on Patreon at patreon.com/Dr. Mary C. Kroll. Our logo is by David Sutherland. You can find more of David's work on deviantart.com/David Sutherland or on instagram.com/Willex_73. We'll be back in 2 weeks, so stay safe, and we'll see you then.